Okay, so we are firmly going down because I think it's pretty clear to me. I'd be willing to make the bet that the media is on the side of vaccine mandates. Okay, they want the top-down control and the sense of theoretical safety that a vaccine mandate gives them in their own little bubble, and so that's why I think they support this. And I think blowing up ivermectin was kind of a method of many that they've undertaken to do that, whether we believe in vaccine mandates or not. But now it's coming. It's coming in the LA school district. It's, Biden is trying to push this thing through the BLS. This is going to be a very, very big deal. What do you guys think is the right thing to do on vaccine mandates, irrespective of all we're going to hear over the next...
Government or private employer mandates, or both?
Well, let's walk through it. I mean,
you're seeing both.
For the government employees, let's start with that. Yeah.
Well, the government mandate, no, it goes through the BLS. It says any company, public or private, that is 100 employees or more.
Well, I mean, I think we all agree that people in the military or people in healthcare, they should all be vaccinated or they shouldn't come to work, correct?
Well,
do you agree with that?
But that's also not even enforceable. Like Andrew Ross Sorkin tweeted out, like he had to take his kid to the urgent care and he walked in and the doctors weren't wearing masks or something.
Yeah, I read that.
And said something about like not being vaccinated, it doesn't matter, or blah, blah, blah. And he
well, that goes to enforcement, but I mean,
moral, liberal,
the military has said you have to be.
And I thought, wait, you brought your kid to the fucking urgent care. Don't you first need to know what's wrong with the kid? You can't prosecute this person's opinion on masks and vaccines before you figure out what's wrong with your kid.
Well, what do you think, Sachs? Military, military, healthcare, teachers.
I think the crux of the issue is whether employers should be able to require that. Well, there's two issues. One is whether employers should be allowed to require it, which I think everybody agree. Not everyone, but most people I think agree that private employers, and you could lump the government in with this, should be allowed to test their employees or require their employees to be vaccinated if they want to, or at least I would support that part of it, is let private enterprises require vaccination if they want. If they decide, hey, in order to come back to the office, you got to be vaccinated for everyone's safety, they can impose those rules. Now, the question is, do we need to go beyond that to have a federal mandate? And it's not that I'm anti-vaccine. I just think that's like an awfully authoritarian thing to do. And it raises a bunch of questions. So, for example, I have a friend who owns a chain of dry cleaners. Okay. He's got over 100 employees, mostly minimum wage in a bunch of different locations. About 20% of his...
What is his ethnicity?
What does that have to do with anything?
Just curious.
He's Sri Lankan. Anyway, so...
He's the third most famous Sri Lankan American. Keep going.
Anyway, so he's got 100 employees. About 20% of them are anti-vax, and they will not get vaccinated, okay? So they will walk out if this is required. They would rather quit that job. Hold on. But he can't run his business if there's a 20% walkout. He just can't do it. Okay. So now we get to the soft part of the mandate, which is, well, instead of requiring the vax, he can do a weekly test. Well, we did that outside here. Who's going to pay for those tests? Who's going to administer them? Is it like, they had a nurse out here with the full,
hazmat.
Yeah, the hazmat thing. So, that's not cheap. So who's going to pay for that? Who's going to do that? What's the documentation around that going to be? Is it get logged into a computer system? What kind of proof? Does it require a trip to the lab, or is this something we can do in 5 minutes? I mean, look, if we had done what Freeberg said a year ago on this pod we should do, which is have these $1 5-minute tests be available everywhere, then maybe that sort of rapid test out would make these mandates more palatable. But we don't have that yet. There aren't enough of these things.
It turns out we still need it even with the vaccines, because no vaccine is going to be 100% effective. And with
but my point is, since we don't really have that solution operationalized, having a hard vax mandate on 100 million employees of private enterprises, that's going to cause, I think, chaos in the economy.
What if we get a variant, David, or Chamath? If we get a variant, God forbid, that is more dangerous than Delta, let's say it spreads just as fast, but it's 5 times as deadly. Does that change your thinking about this mandate? And where do you stand on the mandate?
No, I think the mandate in this very specific narrow instance makes sense. And I think what we should be fighting about is how we actually write it so that it's not wholly expansive. And the reason is because we know that there is a probabilistic distribution of outcomes where a non-trivial percentage of them results in a variant that is deadly. And so we can understand the math and we can understand a sense of time to figure out that if we don't do something and if we don't get to some amount of control around what this is, we're all in really big trouble. So because of that specific thing, I just think this is where, look, the president has the ability to invoke the War Measures Act to do all kinds of things that are super normal. And, we would never say that those abide in normal times. And we've created a framework for him to be able to do those things in non-normal times and then revert to normal. I think this is one of those cases just because I don't think the economic consequences and the social consequences, if we let this thing continue to compound and continue to mutate, it doesn't make any fucking sense. We're not learning anything.
We could have used the War Mandate Act across 2 presidencies to demand some companies make a $1 test.
Yeah.
We have 75, 80 tests approved in Germany. They're down to $2 or $3. Why has the FDA not gotten us to that level that Germany's at? And why haven't we done the War Mandate Act?
I mean, we have like a constructed capitalist model of like, let the free market tell the government what is the right thing to do. And so then they invite Abbott and they invite the guys in and they're like, the White House, and they have a consortium meeting and everyone's kind of a little bit chuckling about this. Like, oh, this is awesome. It's another $2 billion payday, which is what they just got. I don't know if you saw the write-up today, but the federal government is paying Walmart for the difference between the wholesale cost and the retail cost so that consumers cannot now go buy Abbott tests at the wholesale price at the store. $2 billion taxpayer money gone. When we could have had a bunch of smart scientists get together at the White House with a bunch of engineers, take over a friggin' factory, and on a piece of paper, print 8 billion fucking tests, and then chopped them up and distributed them for 50 cents. And instead, we have this problem where we're like depending on the Korean supply, I kid you not, of the test kits that are like plastic. That's where they make all the like pregnancy test kits and all this stuff. And these, this like the commercial model is like, tell us how you want to make these tests, tell us what the right model is. And of course, you end up with a $30 test when in Germany, you can go buy a 50-cent test at any liquor store. And so it's constructed wrong.
Straight up corruption.
And if you go back, like, I don't know if you know this, the production board's named after the
straight into the microphone,
named after the War Production Board, which was set up during World War II.
Pretty humble.
What's that?
It's pretty humble.
Yeah, took the war out, but it was, the idea was like, how do you take a system level design approach to solving kind of big problems? And one of the issues that we had during World War II was a supply chain problem on making tanks and planes. And so they put together a bunch of smart people. Deutsch knows this better than anyone.
Because he was alive back then.
He was alive, and he was, you can look at the old photos, he was there.
Sitting in the front, guys.
He had the hammer.
Say hi to him before he dies. He may die tonight.
In the factory floor.
Old as fuck.
And there was basically a coordinated effort.
It's his birthday today, by the way. Sorry. L'chaim, happy birthday.
Happy birthday. But there was a coordinated effort by engineers at the top down to design a system for making these things cheap and fast. And that's an approach that I think we lost, right? Like we kind of gave way to this model of laissez-faire, like you come in, you tell me what you think we should do. Okay, that's a good idea. Let's take photos and we're out and that's it. Like we don't have a wartime mentality right now. We haven't had a wartime mentality since COVID hit. Everyone's continued to try and parade around and get reelected and, earn votes.
So we're basically we're not taking this.
Well, we're not acting, we're like every time kind of a business or a government or any organization goes through a phase, it goes through a wartime phase or a peacetime phase. We should be acting like we're in a wartime phase and we're not.
Can I ask you a question? If
you may,
3 or 4 of us basically ponied up some money, could you go and print 8 billion of these fucking tests?
In the US, you cannot get them approved without the FDA.
I'm not asking for approval. I'm saying, could you do it?
100%.
And how long
you could buy some old friggin' paper mill and in 3 months, this actually people in this room who could do this in...
Now, isn't there a framework within FDA that basically allows you to effectively experiment on yourself?
There's a compassion. It's for drugs. It's for therapeutics, not for diagnostics.
So you're saying that if I wanted to build my own test and use it,
if you want to build a diagnostic test that tells someone whether or not they have an illness, you have to get FDA approval in the United States. So
that's also just publish the formula.
The summary statement is regulatory capture. Is one of the biggest issues we have.
And in related news,
by the way, another insane statistic. Just sorry to interrupt. I saw this today. I forgot, someone we know tweeted this. Who wants to guess the ratio of administrators to doctors in the US healthcare system?
300 to 1.
Yeah, I saw it 300 to 1. Yeah.
900 to 1 today.
Oh my God.
And that is up from 5 to 1 in 1970.
By the way,
think about it.
Can I just build on what you said?
900 to 1.
Your initial tweet said 300 to 1, and it ended in 2010, right before Obamacare passed. So from 300 to 900 was all Obamacare.
Yeah. Regulatory capture. Sachs is shaking his head.
Which, by the way, nothing against Obamacare, because I think, like, coming as a Canadian, I actually believe in subsidized healthcare, and I think the principle of Obamacare was great. But there was one fatal flaw, which is it basically said, okay, you know what? You're capped at the following margin. And the minute that people said, wait a minute, I can only have a 20% gross margin, what do? You just jack up the prices to basically jack up revenue. Because if you can only take 20%, you're going to take 20% of a bigger number than a smaller number. And so it completely burned the incentives for any healthcare company in the United States to do anything other than just basically walk prices up. And it's funny because if you look at the stock prices of these companies, you would have made more money being long United Healthcare than you would have been owning Facebook, Google, any of these other tech companies in the last decade. Crazy stat.
Speaking of regulatory capture, Tesla got left out of this new tax credit or proposed tax credit.
Insane.
For electric cars. I don't know if you saw that, but Tesla wasn't invited a couple of months ago to Biden's EV summit. Elon responded like, I wonder why I wasn't invited. It turns out it's because they're not a union shop. Their employees make much more money than union employees make. But now as a punishment, but hold on, as a punishment, the $12,000 credit that they're giving to, or they're proposing to give to all EV manufacturers is only if you have union employees. It's $4,500 less to Tesla. So literally 2 massive regulatory captures and corruption go. Or maybe Sachs.
No, I mean, I don't have much more to add to that. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is to serve the unions. It's not to serve clean energy or the EV industry. I mean, a little bit for EV, but it's mostly for the unions.
On the one hand, what we do is we say that climate change is this existential issue. But then when the rubber meets the road, if you look inside the infrastructure plan today, we unveiled basically how we're going to do all the tax credits. And again, it's just an enormous amount of just sloppy regulatory capture. We're doubling and tripling credits in certain places.